Give your sister the check, or you are dead to us." My mother didn't even bother to say hello. She simply pointed at the whistleblower payout sitting on my kitchen counter. My sister Sarah stood beside her, trembling, desperate for the $125,000 I had just earned. She had an audit on Monday morning and a felony-sized hole in her company's bank account. They hadn't come to celebrate my success. They had come to liquidate me to save her. I looked at my mother's hands, the same hands that had destroyed my credit score before I was 18, and understood something with perfect clarity. I wasn't their daughter. I was an insurance policy. They were finally ready to cash in. I didn't scream, I didn't argue, I just studied them and quietly calculated my next move. My job title is Senior Risk Analyst. Companies pay me 6 figures a year to identify disasters before they happen and predict exactly when the structure will collapse. I search for cracks in foundations. I uncover liabilities buried in fine print. And as I sat there in my living room, staring at my parents and my sister, I realized I had been ignoring the greatest liability in my own life for 29 years. To understand why I didn't throw them out immediately, you have to understand the biology of my family. I call it the parasitic symbiosis theory. In nature, some organisms cannot survive alone. They need a host. In our house, Sarah was the host, the beautiful, shining face the world was meant to admire. She was destined to be famous, to marry rich, to put our last name on a billboard. My parents were the immune system, constantly attacking anything that threatened Sarah's comfort. And me? I was the liver. My sole purpose was to filter out the toxins so the rest of the body wouldn't get sick. I was built to absorb the poison so Sarah could remain flawless. They never saw themselves as villains. That's the frightening part. They truly believed sacrificing me to protect her was a biological necessity. To them, it wasn't cruelty. It was survival. I remember the exact moment I understood this, even if I didn't have the words for it at the time. 11 years ago, I was 18. I had just come home from checking the mail, my hands shaking as I held a thick envelope from an Ivy League university. I opened it on the porch. I got in. Not only was I accepted, but I had earned a partial scholarship. It was the proudest moment of my life. I walked into the kitchen glowing, ready to share the news. But before I could say a word, I saw a cake on the table. It read, "Congratulations, Sarah," in bright pink icing. Sarah had been accepted into a local modeling academy, a 6-week course that cost more than a year of my tuition. My father took the envelope from my hands. He didn't smile. He didn't hug me. He read the letter, sighed, and placed it beside the dirty dishes. He told me we had to be realistic. He said they couldn't afford to send me across the country. Even with the scholarship, family resources had to go where the highest return on investment was. 2 days later, a brand new BMW convertible appeared in the driveway. Pearl white, tan leather seats. My mother said it was essential for Sarah's image. She couldn't show up to auditions in a beat-up sedan because appearances mattered. That car cost $45,000. That was my college fund. Money I had earned working summers since I was 14, combined with the savings my grandmother left for my education. They liquidated my future to buy Sarah a prop. I didn't attend the Ivy League school. I enrolled in a state university 40 minutes away. I worked night shifts at a warehouse, loading trucks until my back felt like shattered glass, just to afford my textbooks. I graduated with honors, with debt, and with a spine made of steel. Sarah crashed the BMW 3 months later. She walked away without a scratch. My father bought her another one. That was the moment they broke me. They taught me my dreams were convertible currency for Sarah's impulses. But standing in my kitchen now, a decade later, I realized something had changed. The liver was done filtering poison. Sarah was no longer a rising star. She was a 32-year-old fraud with a failing startup and a felony looming over her. And I was no longer the 18-year-old girl crying over a sacrificed future. I was the woman who knew where the bodies were buried, because I had been the one forced to dig the graves. Sarah wiped a tear from her cheek in one smooth, practiced motion. She said she only needed a bridge loan. She promised she would repay me after her next funding round. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie because I had pulled her credit report an hour before they arrived. She was maxed out. She was drowning, and she wanted to use my head to stay above water. I looked at my father. He tapped his foot impatiently, waiting for me to do my job and filter this problem away. He believed he was facing the same daughter he had intimidated for 3 decades. He didn't realize he was standing in front of a risk analyst who had just decided to liquidate the liability. I let my shoulders slump. It was a deliberate collapse, the exact posture of the defeated daughter they were used to. I covered my face with my hands and released a shaky breath. I needed them to think I was breaking, not strategizing. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, I'll do it. I can't let you go to prison, Sarah." The tension in the room snapped like a severed wire. My mother exhaled deeply, almost deflating with relief. My father leaned back, his face settling into the smug calm of a man who believed he had disciplined a difficult employee. Sarah stopped pacing and looked at me with tearful gratitude. "But we have a problem," I said, letting panic creep into my voice as I stood and grabbed my laptop. "I can't just wire $125,000 to your personal account. IRS algorithms will flag a transfer that size instantly. If they freeze my accounts for review, the money won't reach you by Monday. You'll miss the audit deadline." Sarah's face drained of color again. "I can fix it," I said, typing quickly. "But we have to document it correctly. If I send it as a personal loan, federal law requires me to charge a minimum interest rate. If I don't, the IRS treats it as a gift, and we both get hit with a 40% gift tax. That's $50,000 gone." My father stood up sharply. "We are not paying $50,000 in taxes. Figure it out." "There's one loophole," I said, angling the screen away so they couldn't see my hands trembling. Not from fear, but from adrenaline. "If we classify the payment as third-party restitution, it's tax-exempt. Basically, I'm not loaning you money. I'm covering a debt you owe to your company to correct an accounting error." I looked directly at Sarah. "But for that to work, you have to admit the error in writing. You have to confirm that the withdrawal from your company was, let's say, inadvertent. If you sign a statement saying you took the money by mistake and this is a correction, the IRS treats it as a non-event. No tax, no interest." It was the oldest tactic in the risk analyst's handbook: appeal to a criminal's greed, and they ignore their survival instinct. Sarah didn't see a confession. She saw a way to save money. I opened DocuSign and drafted a simple one-page affidavit. It looked dull, like standard tax compliance paperwork. But in the center of the page, under the section labeled Reason for Disbursement, I left a blank text box. I emailed the link to her phone. "Just fill in the reason field," I said calmly. "Make sure you use the words inadvertent withdrawal so it reads like an accident, not theft. Then sign it." Her phone chimed. She opened the email without hesitation. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't ask questions. Her thumbs moved quickly across the screen. She was so focused on avoiding the tax bill that she had no idea what she was really signing. She typed, "Repayment of inadvertent withdrawal from company funds to avoid audit discrepancy." Then she pressed sign. A second later, my laptop chimed. Document completed. I opened the PDF. There it was, her digital signature, time-stamped, IP-tracked, and legally binding under penalty of perjury. She had just confessed to felony embezzlement. She admitted she took the money, admitted it was company property, and admitted she was trying to cover it up. "It's done," Sarah said, looking at me expectantly. "Now, transfer the money." "I need an hour for the funds to clear the holding account," I replied smoothly. It was a lie. "Go home, get some sleep. I'll wire it first thing in the morning. They were gone within 5 minutes. On her way out, my mother hugged me and whispered that I was a good girl. They stepped into the rain, convinced they had won. I locked the door, slid the deadbolt into place, and stared at the PDF glowing on my screen. I did not send the money. Instead, I saved the file to 3 separate cloud servers. I had the bait. Now I needed to close the trap. I sat in the pale light of my laptop, the rush from the DocuSign setup fading into something colder and sharper. I had the confession. Now I needed to measure the full damage. I logged into the credit bureaus. I usually checked my score once a year, but I had never examined the detailed authorized user history. I scrolled past my student loans, past my car payments, and then I froze. There they were. 3 credit cards I had never used. One opened when I was 19, another at 22, the last one just 6 months ago. The combined balance was $45,000. My parents hadn't only stolen my college fund. They had been wearing my credit score like a stolen coat for years. They added themselves as authorized users to accounts in my name, intercepted the mail, and financed a lifestyle they couldn't afford with my future. Every vacation, every expensive dinner, every gift they gave Sarah, I had paid for it. They weren't just parasites, they were identity thieves. I printed the statements and added them to the growing file. Then the room flashed blue and red. I looked out the window. 2 police cruisers screeched to a stop at the curb. My phone buzzed. A text from my father lit up the screen. "We are doing this for your own good." They had called 911. They weren't waiting for the money anymore. They had chosen the nuclear option, an involuntary psychiatric hold. If they could have the police drag me out in handcuffs, hysterical and unstable, they could file for emergency conservatorship by morning. They could freeze my accounts and seize control of my assets while I was locked away. It was the ultimate gaslight. They expected me to open the door crying, shouting about betrayal, proving the story they had fed the dispatcher. I did not panic. I initiated the contrast protocol. I ran to my closet and pulled on my navy blazer. I slipped on my glasses and put in my professional headset. I opened my laptop, started a Zoom meeting with myself, and maximized a spreadsheet so it reflected clearly in my lenses. I grabbed a clipboard just as pounding shook the door. "Police! Open up!" I didn't rush. I walked. I opened the door mid-sentence, speaking into my headset. "Look, the risk mitigation coefficients are off. We need to restructure the debt before Q3. 2 officers stood there, hands near their holsters, prepared to confront a crisis. I tapped my headset, looking mildly annoyed but composed. "Officers, can I help you? I'm in the middle of a conference call with Tokyo." They paused. They looked at me, calm, professionally dressed, holding a clipboard, discussing finance. Then they glanced toward the driveway. My mother stood there, clinging to my father, sobbing dramatically against his shoulder. Sarah was screaming that I had a gun and was going to hurt myself. The contrast was jarring. Inside my apartment stood a calm professional. Outside was chaos, a shrieking spectacle. "Ma'am," the older officer said, slowly lowering his hand from his weapon. "We received a report about a suicidal individual with a firearm." "A weapon?" I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Officer, the only weapon I own is a quarterly earnings report. My family is in financial trouble. I refuse to give them a loan tonight. I assume this is retaliation." I stepped aside so they could see the apartment. It was spotless and silent. A cup of tea still steamed on the table. The officer glanced back at my parents, who were now loudly arguing with neighbors in the driveway. He shook his head and pulled out his notepad. "I apologize for the disturbance, ma'am. We'll mark this as a false report." "Thank you," I said evenly. "Please ask them to leave my property." From the window, I watched the officers speak to my parents. My father's face turned purple with rage. Sarah stomped her foot like a child denied a toy. They were told to leave or face arrest for misuse of emergency services. Eventually, they drove off in defeat. I closed the blinds. My hands were steady. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved 3 years ago. "Mr. Vance," I said when he answered. "It's Amelia. The contrast protocol worked." "Good," he replied, his voice rough and cold. "Are we ready for the next step?" "Yes, check the date on the LLC filing." "I'm looking at it now," Vance said. "You purchased the tax lien certificate on your parents' house exactly 3 years ago yesterday. The statutory redemption period expired at midnight." I exhaled slowly, a breath I felt I'd been holding since I was 18. "File the deed," I said. "I don't just want the money, I want the roof." 2 days later, I walked into the lobby of Vance & Associates on the 45th floor of a glass tower downtown. The air was cold, the marble floors gleaming, my heels echoing like a countdown. My family had demanded this meeting. After the police incident, they hired a strip mall attorney who filed for emergency conservatorship, claiming I was unstable and a danger to myself, hoping a judge would hand them control of my finances. Mr. Vance intervened, blocked the emergency hearing, and forced binding private arbitration. They thought private meant I would surrender quietly. They had no idea they were stepping into a kill box. I pushed open the heavy oak door to a windowless, soundproof conference room that smelled faintly of lemon polish and old money. A long mahogany table stretched across the center. They were already seated. My father lounged at the head as if he owned the building. My mother clutched her purse, wearing her concerned mother mask. Sarah looked polished in silk, but her leg bounced nervously. Monday's audit was 48 hours away. Mr. Vance sat at the far end like a shark in a tailored suit. A court reporter hovered beside him, fingers poised over her stenotype machine. Their weary attorney stood and began. "Ah, Amelia, the conservatorship agreement is ready. Your father as financial guardian and your sister as—" I walked past him, pulled out the chair opposite my father, and sat down. No greeting, no explanation. I placed a thin file folder on the table. "Where's the check?" my father demanded. "We're not here for a check," I said calmly. "We're here to correct the record." Sarah accused me of being unstable, claiming I'd called the police on myself. My mother dabbed at dry eyes, insisting they only wanted to protect me. Mr. Vance cleared his throat. "Everything said here is under oath and on the record. Proceed." They didn't hesitate. The court reporter confirmed names. Sarah delivered hers smoothly, then launched into a rehearsed story about my supposed delusions. She claimed I'd promised her money for business expansion and then became erratic. My father nodded solemnly. "She imagines things." The stenographer's keys clicked steadily, capturing every lie. Perjury, exactly as planned. When Sarah finished testifying that the money was for expansion and that I had offered it willingly, Mr. Vance pressed a button. The projector illuminated the wall. Exhibit A. A blown-up DocuSign affidavit appeared, highlighted in yellow. Reason for disbursement: repayment of inadvertent withdrawal from company funds to avoid audit discrepancy. Silence swallowed the room. "Miss Miller," Vance said mildly, "why did you testify these funds were for business expansion when you signed a sworn affidavit stating they were to repay embezzled funds?" Sarah's face drained of color. She stammered, then blurted, "She told me to write that. It was a tax thing." "So you're admitting tax fraud?" Vance asked evenly. "Or perjury?" Her mouth snapped shut. Vance clicked again. Exhibit B. A timeline appeared. 10 years of credit card statements. American Express Gold. Chase Sapphire. Discover. Accounts opened in my name. Signatures resembling my mother's handwriting. Charges for vacations I never took, clothes I never wore, a car I never drove. $45,000 in unauthorized debt, Vance stated. Federal identity theft, wire fraud, mail fraud. The statute of limitations has not expired for the last 5 years. My mother gasped and grabbed my father's arm. He turned red and shouted that they had raised me and were entitled to compensation. "You are entitled to nothing," Vance replied. "You stole her identity. That carries a mandatory minimum sentence in federal prison." My father shrank into his chair. "Exhibit C." A deed appeared on the screen. A tax lien deed. "That's my house," my father muttered. "Look at the owner," I said quietly. "EC Holdings, LLC. I purchased the tax debt 3 years ago through a shell company. I paid the back taxes and waited." My mother's voice trembled with hope. "You saved the house?" "No," I said evenly. "I bought the debt. The 3-year redemption period expired yesterday at midnight." I leaned forward. "I didn't pay your mortgage, Dad. I foreclosed. I own the roof over your heads. You're trespassing." The room erupted. My father lunged forward. Sarah reached for the laptop as if smashing it could erase the truth. My mother wailed about family while the court reporter captured every threat. "Sit down," Vance thundered. They did. Small, terrified. He slid a thick document across the table. "This is a confession of judgment," I said, "and a voluntary restraining order." I pointed to the signature lines. "You admit to the $45,000 in identity theft. You vacate the house, my house, within 7 days. Permanent no contact. Come within 500 feet of me or my workplace, and you go to jail." "And if we don't sign?" Sarah whispered. "Then I email Exhibit A to the district attorney," I said, my finger hovering over the keyboard. "And Exhibit B to the FBI. You'll be arrested before you reach the elevator." My father searched my face for the daughter he used to intimidate. She was gone. His hand trembled as he signed. My mother signed, tears falling silently. Sarah signed last, staring at the table as her future dissolved into ink. I gathered the folder, stood, and walked out. The city air felt like the first real oxygen I'd breathed in years. I blocked their numbers before I reached my car. The aftermath came quickly. Sarah was fired the next day after I anonymously forwarded the audit discrepancies to her board. She became unemployable. My parents moved into a small rental 2 towns away. I sold the house 3 months later. The profit cleared the debt they had placed on me and funded my move to a new city where no one knows my last name. I'm alone now, but not lonely. I wake up in a home I own, with credit that belongs to me and a life no one can liquidate. Have you ever had to become the villain in their story just to survive in yours? Tell me in the comments. And if you're listening from somewhere you feel stuck, tell me the time there. I want to see how far this story travels.